So let's consider the new paradigm of responsible AI. First, let's look at a precedent that's been set a long time ago, that of financial audit. Once upon a time, companies listed on stock exchange didn't have a standard for their financial statements, and there wasn't a requirement to have those assured by independent trusted third parties like the large audit companies. And what happened? Well, a number of investors were ripped off because those statements weren't reliable. So the industry dragged along a requirement to create an auditing standard. I feel to some extent we're in the same place with AI, and in fact many of these exponential technologies. The world's moved so quickly and we're getting such advantage from them, but on the other side of the coin, who's watching the deployment of the AI? How do we know that unacceptable bias hasn't crept in? How do we know that we should give control to those computers? How do we know ethically, just because we can do something, that we should be doing it? So with that in mind, spent the last year or so developing a framework and a toolkit which has a number of deployable programmatic solutions to meeting those needs for responsible AI. And we put them into 5 areas to consider. First and foremost, governance. Where did the data come from? Who built the model? How was it quality assured? Model data management. Things that a large organisation will want to have in hand. If we think about what boards are telling us now with regard to the Royal Commission, they're telling us, we wish you'd talked to us 10 years ago about these things. Well, that's what we're talking about today as you give more and more control to AI. Have a governance structure in place that allows you to explain the heritage of the models and the work done. When it comes to the performance of the models themselves, how do you test for bias? How do you test that the population you're trained on is going to give fair results to the population you're going to apply it to? There's about 30 or 40 different technical types of bias, and it turns out that there are tools and algorithms that can test and give results for all of them and feed that back into a governance model. Now, obviously, you've got to be careful what you wish for. Sometimes you may not want to know what bias exists. Now, some bias may be preferable. Other bias might be outright illegal, let's say a gender bias or a race bias. And there's many stories of AIs advising judges on recidivism and attempting to assist or augment their decision-making process that have been proven to have unreasonable levels of bias. So we think testing for the different types of bias is an incredibly valuable offering. Interpretability. Explain to us how this complex neural network made that decision. Explain to us, given you're using continually learning machines, how you made the decision last week, given the models moved on. Explain to us how this black box can be transparent. We need to do that for risk, for shareholders, for stakeholders, and I'm certain in the future for regulators, especially when it's an impactful or important decision. We see this in real life with things like self-driving cars having caused an accident. Now, of course, much, much safer than human drivers, but nevertheless, we need to understand how that decision was made to veer left instead of veer right. Or more tangibly, how was that credit decision made that affected me? What were the factors that caused me to have my loan approved or rejected at a certain limit? Robustness and security. If you think about the emerging area of cybersecurity some decades ago, protecting our IT systems, well, it turns out there's the equivalent paradigm for AI. How do we protect our AI systems? How do we ensure they can't be reverse engineered to get valuable IP or sensitive customer data out of an organisation? How can we prove that they can't be maliciously manipulated to give the wrong result or to drift over time? Do they drift over time? Are they reliable? It all ties back to governance underpinning these things. But the 3 areas of performance are not just ideas, but areas where you can have practical, applicable tools and the results of those exposed to the owner or the person accountable for the AI. And finally, what about not just the regulatory adherence of this AI ecosystem, but within that, what's the ethical framework? If I'm a bank and I see payments from an individual to an oncologist going through the roof on their credit card, and they then apply for a loan, and I know they're going to die, should I give them the loan? Should I even be able to use that data in that way? If I look at your personal data and I can tell it's going to be an unsafe day for you in the workplace, you might not return home from work safely, was I allowed to use your personal data in that way? Is that ethically okay? Is it ethically okay to build subtle lie detectors into voice recognition algorithms? Well, we think all of these areas are largely untested. And when they're spoken about in very general terms. And given this area is moving so quickly, we found it a great challenge, but also a great solution to put in place tools and frameworks to allow you to set and maintain ethical standards and boundaries, even in the face of rapidly moving technology, that tie into these other pillars of, is it robust and secure? Can you continue to interpret it? What does the bias look like? So it's very exciting times. I must say, a couple of years ago, I wasn't dealing with any AI ethicist lawyers. I'm now dealing with 7 of them. A couple of years ago, companies didn't have a chief ethics officer. Nowadays, several large tech companies do. And we think it's an incredibly relevant service to be providing as the world moves quickly into being more dominated by automated machines. And this video explains some of that. Thank you for listening. I'll speak to you soon.
The most immersive, influential and invasive transformation since the introduction of the computer is here. And business will never be the same. Artificial intelligence is re-scripting the human experience. Possibilities are endless, as are opportunities. But with prolific reimagining comes profound risk. How do you avoid bias? Can you remain secure? Have you considered the ethical implications? Can you guarantee your AI will not go rogue? What about people's jobs? What about compliance with current and emerging regulations? Can you explain your decisions should you have to? How do you ensure good governance underpins all aspects of your operation? How can you trust your AI's capabilities to meet your values for your business and your people? Because at the end of the day, amongst the algorithms, the automation, the data science, the technology, the trials and the tribulations sit your most powerful, persuasive and purpose-driven asset yet. Human beings, for whom trust is more important than ever.
So what about you? Do you trust your AI to be responsible as well as responsive? There's only one way to find out.
PwC has developed a robust framework and toolkit to enable you to deliver responsible AI for your business and your people. We assess bias and fairness, interpretability and explainability, robustness and security, all underpinned by strong governance and overseen with a focus on ethics and regulation. PwC, Responsible AI. We're in the business of trust.